Hi YouTube, I'm here with a 2017 Mercedes GLC 300 that I just got at the dealer's auto auction, and it has a check engine code P052E for a crankcase ventilation valve malfunction. I've looked online, I have put my code scanner on it, and come to find out that the part's about $600 if you order it online, and about 6-7 hours worth of labor. So you're looking at close to a $2,000 repair on this. I did some searching on the internet, and I found some references that other people have done this before using a part that is not the $600 part itself, but only a small subsection of that part. Here's the post on the Metris forum that talks about doing just the purge valve here instead of the entire part system. So here's the part number. It's A274-018-7301. This is where I bought mine from. It is mercedes-benzparts.com. You can see it was $63.39. And the part that we're looking at is the part labeled number 120 in that diagram. So here's my code reader, and the two codes that are stored. Just ignore the P06DA code. The one we're focusing on is the P052E. So the part to fix this, let me go over here to the engine, is almost 5 or 6 parts put together. It starts over here, it goes all the way underneath and around over on this side, and ends up with an oil separator that's underneath the motor mount and attached to the block. So the problem is you have to disassemble most of the engine coverings here, as well as taking off the engine motor mount to get through that whole part. However, the culprit, according to the internet forums that I visited, the culprit is this valve here. It gets gummed up and stops actuating. So the idea is that this valve, I believe, from reading the internet, lies somewhere right underneath the intercooler and the ECUs. I think if we take these parts out, we're going to find that valve, and we should be able to just attach this end to a bib that's on the engine, and then we're going to have to splice in this end to the oil separator that's connected to the block. And that oil separator, instead of replacing that, if we can just connect the new valve to it, that keeps us from having to remove the alternator, the air conditioner, the motor mount, and it saves us a lot of trouble. We should be able to do this all from the top part of the engine. They do recommend that you get 4 of the number 4 stainless steel screw type hose clamps rather than using these clamps that are on here. And you'll notice I have so here's the part number that I ordered. I ordered it online from one of the dealership part sites. I think it's about $90 full retail. I got it for 63 bucks plus shipping costs. It was under 75 bucks total, and that was with expedited shipping. You notice I do have 2 of them. I've got this one and I've got this one, because the same day I bought the GLC 300, I bought a GLA 250, and guess what? It's got the exact same code, and it looks like it's the same issue with the GLA 250. I'll try to post a video on that as well if this fixes it, because I'll be diving into the GLA 250 next. As I said before, I believe this valve lies right under here. The genesis of this procedure of just splicing in a new valve rather than replacing the entire part system that Mercedes wants you to actually came from the Mercedes Metris forums, which use a similar engine system. And somebody over there figured out that this was a much cheaper and a much easier way of fixing the problem. And then a couple of guys in the GLC 300 forums said they tried it and worked out well. Unfortunately, they didn't really post any videos or any detailed information. They just said, you know what, it's way quicker. One guy said it only takes 30 minutes. I doubt that's the case. But we know that the part is, like I said, under 75 bucks shipped compared to $600 for the full system part. And I'll try to post a picture of that full system part as well, so you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start this by removing the shroud and then the intercooler and the ECU. I can see the one part of the system, the diaphragm valve right there, and you can follow the pipe on down. So I'm really certain that that's where this valve lies that we need to get to. And here's a discussion on NB World where I first ran across this shortcut, cheaper, easier fix. It says, this gentleman says it took him 3 to 4 hours to fix it. And again, you know, get some number 4 hose clamps, and there's the thread if you want to go visit yourself. But apparently it has worked for GLC 300, so we're going to see if it works for mine. The shroud just pulls up, I believe. Some grommets. That's easy. Set that aside. Now the positive terminal on the battery is cut off. The next thing is to start unhooking what looks like a whole bunch of different hoses and wires, and the advice that I got from the internet searches was basically just take your time and be patient, and you know, look at the connectors on each one of these things. Like this thing just kind of pops out of there. The ECU looks like it's held on by a couple of clips here. Those pop off. So I'm going to take a few minutes and see if I can't get rid of some of the hoses and this intercooler and this ECU unit. I almost forgot, you're going to want to disconnect the positive battery cable as well. So we'll get to that and disconnect that. Although this air intake line is pretty far away from where we're going to be working, I don't see how you can get to some of these other things without removing it. So I'm going to remove that. It looks like it just pulls off right here pretty easily. Lesson learned the hard way. There is a bracket right here that holds these two coolant lines onto the intercooler. And actually what you do is there's just 2 tabs, and you push down on those, actually push up on those tabs to get them to unlock, and that bracket slides out. Unfortunately, I broke the top holder for this line here, so hopefully that doesn't make a major problem. Yep, you just had to tug on that a little bit. If I was doing it over again, I would remove that bottom hose first, because I just wasn't hardly able to get this catch bin over underneath where the coolant leaked out of. So do the bottom one first. This, you can see there's a little wire retainer here, and so you need to get a very small flathead and pop that out. You can see it slides in here. I assume it's the same on the bottom one. You should be able to, hopefully we can just pull this off. Okay, I kind of got stuck trying to get this ECU bracket out of the way, as well as trying to figure out how to loosen this up, because I've loosened these hose clamps and boy, it's just not hardly going anywhere. And I'm trying to, and I can see that there's a bolt here, but I knew there was another bolt. Long story short is it's back up underneath here. So I was watching a different video and noticed that they didn't actually take this bracket out, this one that I broke earlier that held this top hose on. But what you do have to do is you have to remove these hoses, and you're going to lose some antifreeze. So I've got a catch basin down there, and they also recommended that you put some rags on top of the serpentine belt to keep the coolant off the serpentine belt. So I'm going to give that a shot, getting these 2 hoses, these 2 coolant hoses, this one here and this one here off. So a couple of things I'm seeing right now is, number one, here's that diaphragm valve that I was telling you about. That's part of the big part that they want you to spend $600 to replace. It goes all the way over to here. It includes that pipe. And it's worthy to note, in the updated big parts, system parts, that is actually just completely eliminated. They got rid of it, and it's just a joint connection pipe there. So obviously whatever that does, it's not a big deal because they've eliminated it. Other thing I noticed, we got a little bit of oil in the intercooler, so I don't know where that's coming from, but we'll wipe that up and clean that up a little bit. So there's a Torx bolt right up here. I took it out already. That's a tough one. So there's one up under here, up under there, one there, and the third one's there. In the video I watched, you said it was tough to get to. I just use this electric long neck ratchet wrench. By the way, it takes an E12 extruded Torx. And then there's a small star bolt here, right here. So this bridge holds the intercooler on. You just take one of those off, and then you can start to wiggle it out. And it's basically, it's just held in with a O-ring. I thought I was going to have to take these bolts out when I was looking at it originally, and there's 4 of them. I'm like, how do you get to the bottom one? There's no way. So good news is you don't have to do that. So here's the intercooler out. You can see, we start to be able to see, you know, what's going on in here. Here's the underside of that thing, by the way. There's that clamp clip that I broke again. I hope that didn't come back to haunt me, but you don't have to take it out at all. So it looks like our valve and the electrical connection that goes to it is underneath this bracket in the throttle body. So we're gonna have to remove the throttle body and this bracket. This bracket looks like its whole purpose is simply to hold this ECU bracket on. So we're gonna take it off, but to get to it, we gotta take this throttle body off. It's no big deal, it's 4 screws. There's the throttle body. By the way, I mentioned this earlier. These electric ratchets are really nice. Make short work of these long bolts like this. Okay, with the throttle body out of the way, you can see the last Torx bolt under this wiring bundle right here. It's not doing a very good job of showing it to you, but it's under there, right there. By the way, I was mistaken earlier. I said those were E12s, or actually E10 bolts. My E12 worked, but they're actually a little bit smaller bolts. They're E10s. I went ahead and removed the throttle body all the way before I left it hooked into this electrical connection. Just so you know, there's several of these connections. What you do is a little gray piece pops out away from the clip. So, and once it's out, then you can wiggle the clip free. I'm really having trouble over here with this one. I've popped the gray part out. I just cannot get this plug to come out, so right now I'm working around it, but that's been kind of a pain. Then here's this bracket, should just come out now. I'll work on it with 2 hands. Bracket doesn't want to come out because there is a little zip tie to a loop here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that zip tie, and I'll replace the zip tie later when we put it back together. Well, remember how I just said I was wrong. What I said earlier was an E12 was actually an E10. Well, that last bolt way down on the bottom on that aluminum bracket, that one right there, I guess the Germans do have a sense of humor, because that one is an E12. You can see it's shorter and thicker than the ones that hold the top part of the bracket on, and the other ones that we took off earlier, they held the intercooler on. So you do need your E12 Torx, extruded Torx after all. Okay, so now that we got some things out of the way, I can see where we're going. So this is the replacement part here, just to remind you. Okay, and so this is the part that we're going to replace right here that I'm touching. There's the electrical connection right there it's gonna mount right there. Okay, and you can see, you could see the bigger hose, rubber hose, goes out the back side here and runs up here, and it's actually right back there, and runs up and connects in here, right behind the throttle body. Okay, and the smaller end, so this hard plastic piece that has the thicker rubber piece at the end, probably shouldn't use a magnetic pointer for this. We're going to have to cut the line that comes off the bottom. That one runs right along here. So we're probably going to have to cut it somewhere around here. And if you follow it, it's impossible to show you, but if you follow that line, it goes down over here underneath the intake manifold. This is intake manifold. Goes underneath to the engine block and attaches to the engine block underneath here where that air oil separator is. That's the part you have to take the motor mount out to get to. So I was warned that it was going to be tight in there, and they weren't kidding. It is going to be a little bit tight to do this surgery in here. Unfortunately, I'm not a surgeon, so we shall see what we shall see. We're in this far. I'm going to take a look at it for a few minutes and then figure out how to go in and splice in. Okay, Torx bolt, or that bracket, still not wanting to come out after I cut that zip tie. And as it turns out, there is another extruded Torx down there, so we'll see if we can't get to that. Okay, I figured it out. And somebody had mentioned that you need a flathead screwdriver or a bent pick to get this off. Basically, you stick the pick, so I got a 90-degree pick, stick it in behind there, you lift, and it comes right off. Easy peasy. So, first things first, I thought I would, there's basically three connections we have to do. The electrical connection on the front, then I have to cut off the old rubber tube off the back of this valve. Just got to cut that clip off. I'm going to use these wire snips to do that, and then cut the existing new pipe. So we'll just hook it right there, and then this is a different shape anyway, so I'll just get rid of that. Okay, and then the third and the trickiest part, I think, is going to be cutting that hose right down there that I'm pointing the light on, and splicing it into here. And this has already got a rubber splice on it, so might not be that bad. So, but first things first, let's just pop that electrical connector off, right? It's very similar to this one where it's got a little plastic tab that you pop out. And I actually popped the thing all the way out, and I still can't get the little booger to come off. Not sure what's going on. I've tried sticking a screwdriver up underneath the lip. That's right here. Thinking that that's what's catching. Didn't seem to be doing any good. And if you look at the new part, one of the things I like to do on the new parts is see what's holding it. It's basically just two little tabs. So I got to figure out why it won't come off. You would think this would be the easy part. I will confess, though, I am kind of electrical connections challenged. I seem to always have problems. Okay, so now we did get that bracket out. There was a tube hooked on the underside, one more tube underneath there. That was this guy right here. It was clipped in the bottom of that bracket, but it came out relatively easy. Just kind of got wiggled around. Now we can see what we've got. And I was able to just loosen that bracket up after I cut it, or the clamp rather, and pulled it off the back of the old valve. See, the old valve's got some oil. Anyway, so I'll slide this one off, and we'll put the number 4 on there once I get the new valve in position. So 2 of the 3 connections off. Now it's time for the tough one. Okay, so now I've gotten 2 of the 3 connections off. The electrical connection off the front, the rubber hose connection off of the back, and there's the old rubber hose waiting to be connected to the new valve once I get it in there. And then here is the one that we got to cut. That's the guy right there that we got to cut. I mentioned before I was able to get it from underneath some clips under the intake manifold. So I'm going to try to do now, because there's really nothing holding this valve in, I'm going to try to get it out and see if maybe I can make that connection first. So, you know, cut it last, you know, bring the whole valve out here where I can get to it a little bit better, cut the hard line, and then splice this new line onto, so splice that new one onto the existing hard line that I'm going to cut. Okay, so something I just noticed, see these slots here in the new piece? There must be a piece of metal on the back side of the bracket that's holding the old valve in, that those rubber slots slide over. Because if you watch, you can see basically, there we go. You can see, so that's what's holding that old valve in. Okay, so the second step was to get the rubber hose off the back. And by the way, this bracket that holds the ECU is become the bane of my existence. It's been in the way for about 4 different steps. The other guy who was doing the entire procedure said, oh yeah, you just undo a couple of white clips. Well, I don't see the white clips on ours. Plus there's about 20 different wires that are strapped onto that thing. So I'm just gonna give up, and I got a bungee cord just trying to hold it out of the way. So anyway, you can see I just took my trusty tin snips here and got back in there. It is kind of tight, but I just unclipped that band, or cut that band. And so now what I'll do next is get that collar off and pull the rubber hose off the back side of this old valve. And I'm going to leave that hose connected. There's no sense in disconnecting it, because what we're going to do is put a number 4 clamp that we bought. One of these bad boys that we got, stainless steel clamp. We'll use that to clamp that rubber hose onto the back side of this new valve. Then I feel like the tricky part's going to be this one, but I was able to unclip. Well, you can't see it right now, but I was unable to unclip the hose from the bottom of the intake to give myself some slack. You can kind of see the hose in there with the white numbers on it, kind of down underneath that bracket. So we'll see how that goes. So I used my tin snips to cut that hard plastic line. Made sure and give myself plenty of line. I didn't want to cut it too short on it. I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of line here. So will probably, once we get it spliced in there, that's probably going to be too long and it's probably going to kind of bow out, but I don't think it's going to hurt anything underneath there. Okay, so I've gotten the old valve off the bracket now, you can see. So I should be able to pull it out. Let's tighten back in there. Okay. Looks like I'll have a little bit of working room. Not much. A little bit of working room where I can cut this hard line about right there and splice the new one on. Factory clamp cut, just cut the head and then peel it off from there. So now I've got to prep the new valve to go in. Got to feel like a heart surgeon here. So I've got to prep the new valve to go in. So I'm going to cut off the new hose. Again, this hose isn't the right shape anyway, so I'm going to cut this off, and then I'm going to put one of my number 4 clamps. I mean, I suppose I could try to get that to work and pop on. I may try that and see if I can get it the OEM clamp to work. If not, then I'll use one of my little number 4s. So I'm going to do that next. So cutting off clamp with Tim snips, really pretty easy to do. Just with one hand. Okay, I need 2 hands to do this. The new next to one another. This is the part we're not going to use. Okay, there's the new part with the first connection made. Although I haven't got that clamp to seat yet. I'll see if I can get that done. If not, I'll swap over to the number 4 screw clamp. Okay, so I was able to use the Mercedes supplied clamp. I was just having problems getting it to lock down, but just squeezed it with the tips with some needle nose pliers and got it to clamp down. So it's pretty good on there. So now the next step is to get it back around so that we can put on the backside tube and then the electrical connection, and then we start putting everything back together. So we're almost halfway through. So once I got the valve into position, I noticed we had a problem. The hard line, being a little bit longer, has a kink in it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the valve, cut it down a little bit farther to see if we can get the line to sit a little better in there. So here's our valve, and so now I'm going to try to tuck this under the intake manifold. Hopefully not too much sticks out, and then put the valve into place in that holder. All right, I decided against cutting that hose because looking at it, shortening that hose was only going to cause the kink to be a little bit worse. So basically what I did was I went outside of the bottom bracket where this dreaded ECU bracket connects, instead of going inside of it with the hard hose. So hopefully you can see that there where the splice is, and the kinks are not bad that way. And now I've got the worm clamp, screw clamp connected to the back side of the valve, and now I am going to hook up the electrical. One thing that I noticed in that electrical connection was that, it's hard to see it now because I kind of wiped it off, but there was a little bit of oil in there, so I don't know if it leaked in or where it came from. I'm going to hit that with some deoxit just to make sure it's got a good connection in there with the new part. I'm going to put it. So I now have the screw type clamp on the end of the rubber hose that we're going to connect to the back side of the valve. Now it's time to move the valve into position. Being a Porsche 928 owner, deoxit is your friend. Just helps with electrical connections and places where they might get kind of nasty. Getting this bracket to line up is a little bit of a bear. You can see the holes aren't lining up. I got one screw, threaded in. I got another one I tried to thread. I'm going to try to jiggle around, see if I can get it to line up. I know that bottom one, that E12 is going to be a real bear to get in. So now the valve is back in there, all three pieces connected, and it's time to put this thing back together again. I'm getting to that E12, that little screw down at the bottom, by using my hand to go underneath to try to get it to thread. And I got it threaded with my hand. This is probably something really important most of you guys know. Whenever you have a multi-point connection where you're trying to line up, in this case 5 different holes, you probably want to leave some of them loose so you can jiggle around till you get all the screws in, and then make sure that you're able to move the bracket around a little bit so that you can line up the holes down there in the tough spot. So that'll help get that threaded. Okay, figured that out, what was going on. That bottom piece where we have to stick that screw in has to go behind that aluminum bracket, so that E12 screw goes through the outside bracket, then into our aluminum bracket. And when you slide it in there, it wants to go on the other side, but you have to make sure it's on the inside. So now the holes up here are lining up much better. Silver bracket's on. Throttle body coming up next. Throttle body's back in. Next, the intercooler. Took the throttle body off because once I got it on there, I knew that there was a plug. I just couldn't remember where it was, and I couldn't find it anywhere visible. And here it is, all the way on the back side. And so you don't forget to plug that connector in before you screw the throttle body on. Again, here's your intercooler. That end just slides into the throttle body. There's a little Torx head screw that we need to reattach. Electrical right there. There was a little, looked like a water line right there with a clamp. Obviously the 2 big clamps here, and there's that one part that I broke. I don't know if I'm going to try to zip tie it or what I'm going to do, but I may just leave it the way it is. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. All right, let's see if I can get this thing wiggled in with one hand. So we got to make sure that we're matching up the screw brackets. Down below, I'm going to hook up this pipe here as well. I'm going to need 2 hands. Throttle body's back in place now. I just need to, hook up all the clamps and the electrical fittings. No big deal. So this is just super simple to get back on. You just make sure the spring clips are back seated where they're supposed to be, and you just press them on. There we go. Goes on. Okay, next up is to try to get the ECU back into place. As I mentioned before, that ECU bracket's kind of been the bane of my existence doing this job. It just seems like it's always been in the way. I couldn't figure out how to get it out completely out of the way. There's just too many different wires connected to it, so I kind of left them alone. So I'm hoping that pays off now, because all I really need to do is seat it in these rubber grommets here, and hopefully it's not too bad to get that ECU back in. ECU went right back in. I had a little bit of trouble. There's 3 rubber grommets that ECU bracket sits in that one silver big bracket that we bolted on. I just jiggled around a little bit. It went seated okay. It wasn't any big deal. And then getting the electrical connectors back on, no problem. All the little clips and stuff that you're worried about when you're taking the thing out, remembering where they go. It was all pretty easy to remember where it went. It just kind of all fell back into place. Doing the last check for any connections that we might have missed. I don't see any, so I think I'm going to put the shrouds and the air tube back on, fire it up, see how it goes. Okay, I got everything put back together. Don't see any loose connections. It's all fitting pretty well. So now we're going to try to start the car up and see if we can clear that dreaded check engine light. Once I got those two coolant hoses back on the intercooler, I'm going to go ahead now and take out my little catch pan for the coolant. I didn't lose a whole lot. Some of it went on the ground. I would say no more than a couple of cups though, total. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to save this because it's got some debris in it, but not a whole lot of coolant came out of the intercooler when I took it off. Okay, back in the car, and our dreaded check engine light is off. And we've still got the one code that apparently is nothing much you can do about that, but that P052E. But our other code is off. You gotta love it. 75 bucks. I'd say probably took about, if I was not taking videos, I would say I probably put about 4 hours of time into it. If I was doing it again, I could definitely do it in 2 hours. And hopefully with the video, we'll save you a little bit of time as well. All right, so there you go. I'll update it if the check engine light comes back on, but for right now, it looks like it works. All right.